we're going to switch gears into support services and what changes have happened during and what will continue to happen in some way after the pandemic in terms of support services for international students. It's a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Judith Pennywell, the director of the International Center at the University of Michigan here. We're not too far apart here in the city, but we're still meeting virtually at this point. As the director of the International Center at the University of Michigan, Judith oversees international student, scholar, and employee services, as well as global engagement and education abroad programming. She has more than 25 years of experience in the fields of international education administration and student affairs, and has taught leadership and multicultural education courses. Her professional background includes managing immigration services, education abroad, cultural programming, international recruitment, ESL, partnerships and agreements. She earned a doctorate in higher education leadership and policy from Vanderbilt University with research focused on campus internationalization. Judith was the chair of the NAFSA 2019 Annual Conference and Expo, the largest gathering of professionals in this field, and she previously served on the board of the Association of International Education Administrators and was an AIEA President Fellow. Judith, thank you so much for participating in this symposium overall and for organizing this entire panel with your wonderful friends, colleagues, and panelists here.
Thank you for the kind and generous introduction. And yes, these are great colleagues of mine and also great friends of mine. And we envision this conversation as being us at a conference, having an adult beverage and maybe a snack and just kind of talking about what we're seeing on our campuses nowadays after the pandemic. And boy, I can't wait to see them after the pandemic. So, so in person, not on Zoom. So I'll start by introducing my colleagues and saying a little bit about the institutions that they come from. Let me share my screen. It'll take one quick second. Okay, so hopefully you can see the screen. As John Singleton, who's the Director of International Services at Texas Christian University, also known as TCU, will hopefully join us shortly. He was called away for a moment. And TCU, if you don't know, is in Fort Worth, Texas. It is a private institution with over 11,000 students. They have a 4% international student population, but it is a very close-knit student group. So I hope he'll be able to join us to talk a little bit about the students that they serve there. They are probably the only school in the country with the mascot, the horned frogs. So go frogs. Our next panelist is Marcia Taylor. She is the Director of Office of International Services at USF World at the University of South Florida. She is the PDSO and RO responsible for all of their immigration services and so much more. Thank you for joining us today, Marcia. University of South Florida is in Tampa, Florida. It has over 50,000 students, and that international students representing about 9%, am I correct, Marcia, of your student body? They have a more typical mascot of the Bulls. And I'm only talking about this because we are in the middle of football season. So I thought that would be of interest to everyone. And finally, we have Ms. Sevgi Ural from the University of Miami. She is the Associate Director and Team Lead of International Student Scholar Services, which is in the Division of Enrollment Management. The campus has about 17,000 students, and the percentage of international was almost 14%, if I'm not mistaken. And they are known as the Hurricanes. And I'm from the University of Michigan here in Ann Arbor. We go by the Wolverines. I think that's another unique name. And we have a population of about 47,000 students. We're at about 14% international student body. And like the other institutions represented here, we are a doctoral serving institution with fairly high research at each of our institutions. So the more I dug, the more I realized we have a lot of things in common as institutions. So by way of introduction, that's a little bit about ourselves and our institutions. So what I wanted to do today, I'll stop sharing the screen because this is a conversation. Again, we're hanging out in Denver or someplace at a conference, and we're just catching up and figuring out what's been going on our campuses recently. So I think we're all back, correct? Stop sharing, perfect. So Sevgi and Marcia, I hope you'll just jump in as I ask this, but I fully believe in order for us to move forward, to move past the pandemic, we ought to pause. We ought to take a moment and pause and look back and think about the things that we've gone through, the significant changes we've all had to make, and the impacts that have been on our international students and our university communities as well. So my first few questions in this panel really is about what challenges did your student experience during the past 20 months? What were the most significant changes at your institutions? And so I just kind of open there and hope you can fill in some blanks for us based on your institutional experiences. So unmute yourselves and start talking.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Judith. It's wonderful to be a part of this panel. Hello again, Marcia. And so, this is a great question. I would say, and I think this affects all of us, in addition to the overall uncertainty surrounding the pandemic, some of the substantial challenges that were unique specifically to the international student population, I would say, included, travel issues, very fundamental. The worldwide temporary suspension of the issuance of the US visas, the embassy and the consulate closures across the globe, the closing of the borders of so many different countries, reduction in air travel, US federal government travel restrictions to enter the US. These were all very fundamental but basic at the same time. And very real challenges that our students faced. In the beginning of the pandemic, back in the spring of 2020, it was during spring break when all of this started at several of our universities. And, some of our students were traveling abroad, others were here in the US. And there was a dilemma because the ones who were abroad, they were having issues about being unable to return, while there are others that were here that were facing a dilemma of being away from their support services, away from their families, and being here, isolated in a new country. And these were very fundamental. Another challenge that we had was, the ambiguous guidance that we had. At the time, the guidance was evolving rapidly at the beginning of the pandemic, back in spring of 2020, and the evolving nature of these federal immigration policies put our offices at the forefront of communicating with students during a time that was of great uncertainty, and being able to provide guidance and reassurance to students and scholars and the university as a whole was, we were all working together as a continuous and ongoing effort. And these were challenges that I think come to mind, from our institution, just some examples that we had.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was similar across the United States of the challenges. And I think as offices, we needed to figure out how we were going to pivot because we were also in lockdown and we were also going virtual. So suddenly we're like you're saying, Sevgi, we were on spring break and never came back. And so here we were in our houses. Did we have the equipment to be able to move forward and go online? So universities had to decide how were you going to handle those situations. And I think each institution handled it differently. I had a couple of staff who stayed in the office. They did not have the ability at their home to be virtual. So I had a couple that would come in and handle some mailing. But we had to quickly determine how we were going to interact with each other. And then how are we going to interact with our students? And I'm sure each university came up with a different way to do that. How do you advise virtually? How do you let the students know you're advised virtually? How do you keep the students connected? there was some programming, but also particular to our offices to communicate the ambiguity of the immigration regulations, how we're interpreting it for our institutions, what was happening as we were moving forward. How do you communicate with the parents? Parents were very concerned. Do I send my students home? Do I keep them there? What do I do? And this situation continued to evolve from March 2020 to today. Right? It's been this evolving situation where we were constantly thinking about how do we serve our students in the way that will be best for them and their particular situation. And I think that when I look back, I think about that the most is how do we serve them and how are we able to get through that?
I think one of the things that we experienced here, we have an awfully large population of graduate students. So we're over 65% graduate or professional students. And so for a lot of our students in doctoral programs who were in the middle of research, they were like, how do I get into the lab? The university's closing. What about my research? I can't slow this down. I've got, deadlines and that kind of thing. And students who would have graduated in spring of 2020, what does this mean for OPT, for finding a job, and I think the pressure from parents were a little bit different since we have, presumably an older population given how many graduate students we have. But I know in talking to John Singleton about TCU, and they're very close to their students and parents and that kind of thing, just the number of calls and the amount of reassurance they had to give. And advice they had to give, if this was my child, what would I do? Right? What, do I send them home? Do I, ask them to come back, or do we wait it out? And he also spoke about how many services across the university came together to support students. So kind of advocating with the housing folks, with the dining folks to continue to remain open, because it was not easy for part of that time to get back to home countries. And there was then certainly, does it make sense to go, right? This will be over in a couple of months, right? Right, I'm still waiting. So it's really quite interesting, the different things that we went through. Have you noticed any, as you kind of get to speak to students more personally again, have they expressed other concerns that they had or challenges they experienced, not only at the start of the pandemic, but as that fall semester of 2020 came around and that kind of thing?
I think there were challenges on the academic side that were different for our international students. We had about 650 students outside the United States. Some joined us for the first time and stayed with us for a whole year in their home countries, virtual. And classes were at the time we are in Florida, so Eastern Standard Time. Now, if you're in another country outside of our time zone, that might have been at 4 a.m, it might have been at midnight. And so there were students that have to turn their days around. And Sevgi, you were saying some things when we talked previously about what happened, some of the students that they had to do with that challenge of timing.
Right. So for ours, it was, the course delivery. So we moved from entirely remote in the spring of 2020 to asynchronous and synchronous learning that was offered beginning in the fall. Students who were unable to travel due to travel restrictions or any other issue and were not able to come here in person had the ability to enroll remotely. So that was offered by the university. And so the ones who were not able to do that had that option. And the ones who were able to travel or remained in the US had the option to enroll in hybrid programs on campus. Effective this fall, we've transitioned to in-person. So we've made a giant leap forward. We made great progress, and we've listened to the students, and we see that the students want ownership in their academic programs. We had a new program this year because, like Marcia said, we had so many students who were remote who would not come to the campus the entire freshman year, their first year. And so we had a program called Year 2 at the U, which was a great event because what they would do is, they had the opportunity to go through the resources available. They had the opportunity to engage with one another, meet one another. They had the opportunity to meet their peers that they didn't have the opportunity to meet in person and see the campus. So there were a lot of benefits to that program that we witnessed this fall. And so we're hopeful. We're looking forward towards the future, and we're hoping that will be as normal as possible, and have those increased face-to-face interactions with our students. And they'll have that true learning experience of being in the classroom and outside, and adjusting to life here in the US. That's an experience in itself that, we're very excited to be able to witness in our students as they move forward in their educational programs.
So you both have teams that you supervise, you have students that you're responsible for. What kept you up at night during the pandemic? What were your greatest worries, trying to deliver what you're supposed to deliver for your institutions and for your student bodies?
I think you were muted. So lots of things kept me up at night. My phone would ring a lot at the beginning. In March of 2020, I had a lot of phone calls. We switched to virtual phones. That's what we're on now. So I live with this headset all day because my computer is my phone via Microsoft Teams. And so I put it on my phone. I can access Team on my phone. And we had parents calling, frantic students calling. So it kept me up at night, that decision of stay or go, right? Who should remain in the United States and who should go? And, as a parent, I had honest conversations with parents about that. It also kept me up at night of how we were going to stay connected as a team. And so we put together, to this day, we still do it. We put team meetings, and we had specific times, and we still meet together. On Mondays, I have like 4 or 5 meetings, and on Wednesdays, I have other meetings, so that the team could come together and talk, and just continue to make sure that both ourselves were well, our team was well, and things were going fine, and they had what they needed to do their job. Because it's difficult when you're not in the office. You can go office to office and see how people are. So.
Yeah, exactly. Just like what Marcia shared too, the overall uncertainty of the pandemic really kept us all up for many a nights, and it still does at times. And the impact that it has on the lives of our students, the staff, of everybody that we interact with. That was something that, is a work in progress at this point. And like Marcia said, the students who are traveling or who are here, the students who are graduating that semester, especially the spring of 2020, like you had mentioned before, Judith, the OPTs, are they going to be able to be eligible for these benefits that they've worked so hard for? That was one of the goals that they've had throughout their academic studies. We've had scholars who uprooted their entire lives to come here and then go to the airport and not be able to travel. These are day-to-day, real life examples of people who have been affected directly by everything that's going on. But I also kind of want to touch upon a little bit of positive, if you will, because I know that there are so many things that we've had to overcome throughout these past 20 plus months at this point. And I think one of them would have to be the seamless continuation of the delivery of our services and benefits and assisting our students. Like Marcia said, we had to transition very quickly to a remote work environment. So we went from everything being paper-based, everything being in person, to entirely remote. And that transition had to happen efficiently and very quickly. And so we had to look at different models of being able to implement these changes effectively for the students. And we find that, this change, albeit it was difficult at the time, but when we look back, it was one of the greatest changes that we made was, the advising remotely, the Zoom or Teams, like you said, Marcia, or via phone. We see that the benefit of this for students was great, because if they're abroad or here, they still have the ability to interact with us one-on-one based on their availability and their time zone. So we were very flexible in that, and they had that opportunity to deal with us one-on-one, which allowed for individual personalized attention for them. And same with our processing of our documents and our services. These were all transitioned entirely to online forms, including I-20 issuance, OPT authorization, CPT authorization, et cetera. So we see the benefits to this day of all of this, and we see that the students still prefer being advised virtually on Zoom or on phone as opposed to in person?
I think one of the pivots that I'm most proud of is the fact that we figured out how to do this virtually, right? We had typically every day, every afternoon, walk-in hours. So we called them quick question and answer, QQA. And so people are accustomed to coming to our office. We do it in our site, and we'd have certain days where we'd be on North Campus, which is a few miles from where we're located. The students usually either would have to take a bus here or arrange to meet someone up there on North Campus. But it was something that initially kept me up at night, but ultimately we were able to connect with some of our academic partners who'd already had these great technology systems in place to say, hey, can we get in on that action? How do you design this advising module so that you can do this? And how do you design one that you can kind of have a virtual drop-in appointments and that kind of thing and still have private conversations and that kind of thing. So it really was the strength of some of our partnerships with one of our biggest colleges and schools that helped us not only figure out how to do it well, but they actually supported us in getting kind of the technology set up. So that was just really one of those stories that, we know coming out of this pandemic that it took a village, right? And so, and we definitely were able to call on our academic partners to help us out at that point. So, so what changes did you make to serve students? Like any other changes you want to mention?
So I did one change that personally was great for me, and it seemed to work with the students really well. As we talk about having to get information out quickly to the students, to the parents, to the departments, to everyone around campus, in the summer of 2020, I started a weekly director's chat and continued it up until the beginning of this fall, and then I'm getting ready to pick it back up. So every week, I hosted a director's chat at 7 at night and 9 at night. And then once in a while, I would pick groups of students, like all the graduate students who were brand new, and I'd do one at 6 a.m. because that time zone would work the best for some of the students that we were recruiting. And it was an opportunity for me to impart information, get questions directly from students. And sometimes I did it like this session, which we call Teams Live, where you're a panel and then the audience you can't see. And then other times I did open team meetings, which that's what I enjoyed the most, where I see all the students' faces. And there were times where you would have students from all over the country, and they were all meeting each other at the same time that I was meeting them, and we were answering questions, and it was so much fun. And I thought it was a great way to meet students. And I later heard from some colleagues that students had bragged that they got to meet the director of the international office, which of course I thought was really funny because, you're just who you are, but you forget, right? They don't get to see the director of the office, especially when you're a large, 15-person office. They see these other individuals. And that's something that I want to keep going because I liked that connection to the students. I felt it opened up our office in some way, opened up my role to be more student-centric and caring, right? You could really show how much you care, which of course you always cared in the background, but if you weren't regularly meeting with the students, how did they know? Right?
That's interesting because it really is speaking to the fact that you can still be high touch and high tech at the same time. So that's amazing. Yeah. So you've got a bunch of followers, I'm sure, and it's
a lot of fun.
Ed.D, are there other changes you want to talk about?
Sure, yes. To touch upon both what Marcia said and what you also mentioned, one thing that we took great pride in doing was fostering our cross-campus collaboration with different departments on campus. This is something that we value greatly because that way we're able to, reach out to the entire student body in different areas, and we're able to partner with the resources available, and we were able to offer a wide variety of programs on Zoom. And then we did try actually, in-person events 1 or 2 times later on, but this was last spring. So it was in the beginning, but initially, a lot of different things that we were able to do were our resource fair, the involvement fair, We cooperated with the Housing and Residential Life to have a chat with the students who were on campus, living on campus at the time. We were talking with the Wellness Center and having COVID fatigue and mindfulness sessions with the Wellness Center. So these were different opportunities that we were able to engage with our students, and we were able to partner with campus partners in a closer way, and because everybody wanted to help. That at the bottom line was, everybody was concerned. Everybody was trying their best to be a support service for the international student body. And, the ones who are here and the ones who are abroad who want to be here, but were not able to come. So that was something that we valued greatly. And we also took a creative approach to communicating the relevant information to our students. So not only did we update our information website, our website with the COVID-19 information page, but we also created a very, very in-depth FAQ section for the students. And this ranged for all types of information, including immigration regulations, academic requirements, eligibility for off-campus employment. And basically the fundamental purpose of this was to allow students to understand and maneuver the complexities around the pandemic and how it impacts their immigration status, their academic situation, travel information, government updates. This was all disseminated to students electronically, in addition to social media and the webpage that we created for them. So we update that frequently for them. So that way they're always in the loop as to what's going on. And at least it gives them some sense of comfort to know that they have our support 100%, no matter what.
So thinking about kind of current state and future state, what are some of the pivots that you've made that you're maintaining and might even enhance moving forward?
I think without a doubt, the way that we deliver advising to our students, that has evolved so much, from being entirely in person and to now utilizing electronic platforms such as Zoom or Teams. This gives us that added level of flexibility and the ability to interact one-on-one and give those students that individual attention that they need, especially during these difficult times. And recently what we did was, I don't know, Marcia, Judith, you may be doing something similar to that effect, but we recently developed like a tracking system to see what students prefer in terms of the advising, whether they prefer Zoom or in phone or electronic versus via email, for example. And we found that over the course of this period that, over 95% of these students the interactions were based on email interactions alone. So the mode of our advising and how we provide services has changed so much, because right now with the pandemic, I'm sure this is the same situation with your institutions as well. We no longer have paper-based forms or applications for the students. Everything is electronic. And so all they need to do is complete the dynamic form that we have and upload the documents, and we review it electronically. And the processing times have shrunken because of this, because we're able to move very quickly and efficiently and get through everything as quickly as possible to assist these students. And these, I think, will stay on. I think we will keep the electronic forums moving forward. We will keep having that opportunity to advise online and remotely on Zoom or phone. These are things I think that are here to stay, to come in the years to come.
I would completely agree that the ability to have an appointment virtually is a game changer. I have advisors, we were given the flexibility of hours when fall came. So we can, I have advisors who work 10 to 7. And so they can meet with a student in an appointment after 5. Right? Contact a student after 5. Some of us have contacted students after hours from our home because we have the Microsoft Teams. And so students can go onto one of our e-forms, request an appointment, and they can say, I'd prefer to meet you virtually, or I'd prefer an email. And overwhelmingly, the students prefer to meet with us virtually. We do have some walk-in hours because there are some students who want to come in and just chat, but it's much more meeting in this way. And we all have some funny stories about how I personally have met with students while they're on the bus in the background, and a few cases where I had to ask them to tell their roommate to put some clothes on in the background when they walked through. So you do have some interesting, kind of the Zoom stories that you had with, that you heard in the general public. But I think the students are finding that they're more in control of when they can see you. Whereas before it was, here's our times, this is it. And then we'd maybe email you, right? But now the student can say, hey, I'm only available these times. And we find a way to meet them where they need to be. And I don't see that changing. I think that has been great. And the other game changer is our leadership is understanding that we don't need to be a 9 or an 8 to 5 office. That doesn't necessarily make sense for us. Some of our work is done after hours. And so it's okay to be flexible. It's okay to have some staff work at home so they can be more flexible. And that truly is going to continue to be impactful on our students because we'll be able to design the times that we can meet with them, what's convenient for them, not what's convenient for us, right? 8 to 5 might be convenient for us, but what's convenient for them might be much different.
Right.
Let's talk about students for a while. So they've been through a lot. There's the pandemic. Around the world, people, heard and saw what happened to George Floyd, and that had a major impact on how students understand and view the United States. There was a rash of very unfortunate violence against Asian and Asian Pacific community, Pacific Islander community in the US. What are you noticing in your students, right? How have they changed? What are their needs now? Have they shifted any? I can say that, our students, we've observed that there's a lot more vocalization about mental health and well-being. And we've tried to respond to that by working with our kind of Wolverine Wellness, our wellness center, and making sure that they have access to our counseling center and that kind of thing. And we've definitely seen a lot of interest in some of the programs that we do that allow students to chat with one another with a counselor in the room, or in the virtual room. So, but yeah, just curious about some of the changes you've noted in your student body. But I will pause here to say hello to John Singleton from TCU. I'm glad you were able to join us and took care of your matter. So thanks for being here. We are talking about some of the changes that we're encountering now, and kind of thinking current state and future state, and so I was asking about the student body and that kind of thing. So you're welcome to join in, but I think Sevgi has unmuted herself, so maybe have her say something before you jump in, John.
No, so hi, John. Nice to see you again.
Thank you.
So one thing, without a doubt is, I think this goes across the board, across all institutions. We've seen that students are so resilient. They're very resilient in all that they do. There is that added layer of empathy now, as there's awareness of what's going on with the different attitudes and behaviors. There's that increase in that desire for the peer-to-peer interaction. We have a culture of what we call Canes care for Canes, for example, here, and I'm sure there's something similar at Marcia and John and Judith at all your institutions as well. And that relies on the peer interactions and mentorship, and it instills in these students the sense of social responsibility for one another and looking out for each other. And I think these are things that are now coming more at the forefront of everything, and the students want to have an ownership and a voice in their education. They want input. They want to be able to have a say in how they experience their education, and they don't want to just be told, no, this is the way it is. They want to be a part of it because it's something that's face to face and it affects them whole heart, as a person in society, in all aspects of their lives.
Judy, would you like? I'm so sorry for arriving late, and yes, I did get everything taken care of. The danger when you arrive late is that you repeat things that smarter people have already said better. So with that risk, I'll just note one of the most obvious changes that's taken place is that now students realize that digital is an option. So often the first question that I'll get from students when we're setting up meetings and things like that is, is this FaceTime or can we do this by Zoom? And it's allowed us to go back and rethink every program we do for whether or not there's a meaningful student interaction that needs to take place, or whether or not we can serve more people better by doing some things digitally. So we might do our OPT workshops or our CPT workshops or workshops related to work and immigration, where I don't think there's a big need for student engagement. We might do those by Zoom, whereas we might then be able to move more of our orientation towards student development and engagement issues. So I think that's one of the changes that's not ever going to go away at this point, is prove to us that this requires us to meet face to face.
You have a fairly close-knit student body, I think, or at least the international students at TCU seem to really feel like they're part of a community. And so how has the pandemic and kind of this return and digital choices and that kind of thing impacted how they interact with one another?
Judith, that's a great question. In fact, it's a really interesting question. It's rare that I will just say out front that doing Zoom and digital is a negative, but in this one case, I will say that, yeah, it had a negative impact on our student body. The class that came in 2020 particularly, many, if not most of those students started their semester online outside the US. And they do not feel like they're fully connected to the university. And the previous groups all feel that way. And the 2021 class feels that way. But we have noticed a very specific and measurable difference. The 220 students, it requires a little bit more work to get them to come out. They're still responding as sort of the first COVID test group, if you will. And I think it had a negative impact there. But I think it also had that positive impact that you mentioned, Judy. I literally had 4 students walk out of my office this morning after having proposed an assessment and program for family weekend, because they saw that international students don't have their families here. And I can't remember a group of students just coming in and saying, we want to assess this and do a program. So I think in some ways, the digital impact is that students feel like they do have a real legitimate say in their choices. And I think that's a positive too.
What are you seeing with programming on your campuses in Florida and student engagement with one another?
So we've been limited to small group programming only. So most of our programming has been virtual. There has been a bit of Zoom fatigue, and yet we've noticed that some of our recent programming, we've had the highest attendance ever. So we have a weekly program, and excuse the terminology, it's really cutesy, but it's called Wednesdays with World, because we're, our unit is World. And so on Wednesdays, we gather the students together to have what some people call a coffee hour, but it's not really a coffee hour. It's just this time where we have a student group highlight their services, or we talk about something. We use that time to talk about what happened with George Floyd. And, we had a demonstration here that resulted in a building exploding, not on campus, but close to campus. Yeah, that was the tense.
There's a story.
There's a tense. There's a story. There's a story there. Anyway, it was, so we had, that was interesting because we had to explain to students about participating in demonstrations and how you demonstrate and where your visa status lays, and because some of the domestic students were prepared to be arrested, and so we had lots of conversations during Wednesdays with World, right? So we had these really open conversations, and the students come, and so like the other panelists have said, students want to be in person though. They're saying, when can we come together? When can we come together? And so we will be opening up very soon to have more in person. services and more in person, but we're teaming with other offices and trying to have more, I think, more meaningful program. It's not just let's get together and play soccer, which they love to do that, but it's let's get together and talk about this burning topic that we see in the world. Let's make sure we talk about the environment or whatever. And that's different than I saw before. Our students just wanted to kind of have fun and dance together. And now they want to talk about more meaningful things.
It's been a meaningful period of time.
Exactly. And the same with us as well. So we actually had one of our first in-person events a few weeks ago with what we call the International Student Resource Fair, where we partner with so many different campus partners to have those resources available to the students so that they know what they can engage in, what they can do, how they can participate, and different departments that can help them and gear them towards success throughout their academic career here. And so we saw that both the departments as well as the students were so happy with that, just seeing those interactions. And yes, everybody was masked up, but you can see the smiling eyes, if you will, under those masks, because everybody just wants that person-to-person interaction at this point. And so, like John said, our orientations were also moved entirely online with the pandemic. So we started moving everything fall of 2020, spring 2021, fall 2021, they were all online. And so now we're really hoping that in the spring that we will be able to do this in person. And we are working with the university guidance in terms of, making sure that everything is socially distant and safe for the students that are coming in. And we are working with one another, with the different departments and the students to see what we can do to have those meaningful interactions with our students in person as much as we can.
Yeah, orientation was interesting. We had in our kind of 3 weeks before classes started, we did several social events that were outdoors, tours of campus, tours of the local farmers market. They went to an outdoors concert, and they were, so many students wanted to go. There was wait lists, right? So those were really, really popular. But one of the things that came out of the pandemic, we had to, of course, not do. We had just geared up in 2019, 2020 to start doing pre-departure orientations overseas in certain countries. And we had to cancel. It was so sad, but one day, right? One day. But we moved those online, and the first summer, they were okay. But the second summer, we worked with our alumni department and really engaged some of the alumni clubs overseas when we were leading them. So we'd have one that was kind of focused on Indian students, one on Chinese students, so Korean students, and those clubs participated. So we really feel that when we can return in person, fingers crossed, as soon as possible, we'll have more connections and better connections on the ground. So that's something that we've kind of experienced during the pandemic, and we'll hopefully be able to carry forward that relationship. Another programming idea that we did in conjunction with our rec sports center, our recreational sports center, they have an event called Sip and Stroll. And so we have this lovely arboretum on campus, and they would set up a table, they'd have hot cocoa, and encourage people to take a walk, right? And, with your friends outdoors, you can wear a mask or not, you're outdoors. And those were really popular events. And we started to kind of use that model for some of our programs. So we have a small graduation reception we usually do. And so we made it an outdoor event, right? And it was just more, we didn't want to have people socialize per se at that point, given the rate of COVID in our community, but we had a setup where students can come and kind of get, a party hat or whatever, and a Block M cookie. So our logo, the M, and the Block M cookies are special. So, so we at least were able to celebrate the students, and they, that was a well-attended event. People were like, yeah, I'm here for my Block M, I'm graduating. So John, any unique programs or any things that you all did at TCU?
First, kudos to my colleagues. I'd love to sit here and actually ask them more questions about those programs because they sound fascinating. TCU, we're small enough that I think we can meet most CDC guidelines, even if everybody attends. So we're not quite in the same situation as perhaps U of M or Miami, but
You have-
but nonetheless, we did. We had to think about some of the programming, but it was really a good chance for us to also think about how to put ourselves in some of the programming that the students wanted but weren't really getting. So we were able to work with the folks that do first year programs and sort of refurbish the academic content so that students, we advised all international students in June, just like any regular domestic student, whereas historically they get advised in August. And the outcome of that was that they all got to sign up for their classes in June. So we noticed a sense of joy with our students this year that had not been present before. And it was great for us because it also heightened our learning curve. There were pieces of the advisement process that I didn't know anything about. So it was a great chance to learn. So yeah, then the other thing, the fascinating thing about digital programming is that even when you're denied being in each other's in presence, now all of a sudden you've just opened up the opportunity for anyone on earth to be one of your programs. So I'm fearless about asking. So if I've invited, for instance, Sana Marjanovic, who's a very famous Bosnian actress who did a program on genocide. I invited her to sit with our students who were going in a restorative justice program. She agreed. So 15 of our students got to talk with a very famous person from Bosnia who had been through a number of different programs. And we experimented with things like that just because we were trying to figure out ways to make the online seem better than since they weren't able to be in each other's company.
I recall you had a lovely alumni reunion this past summer as well.
Oh, that's right. That you say Dr. Pennywell was an absolute favorite among my students and was present for one of our international alumni events on campus, and or actually on Facebook, and it was beautiful. It's fun to watch those things. It's fun to watch the students take those things and go with them, and yeah, they're doing a lot of stuff. That sort of reminded our alumni that they also have a say in what they do. A lot of times international students are a little bit more cautious and polite about not doing something if the alumni office didn't propose it or something like that. And I think this has put students back in sensing that they can demand something from their own degree in their university. And I think that's a positive.
And, you really bring up a great point with the orientation, the registration part, right? So if you're doing it online, why would you prevent international students from doing it alongside the domestic students? So that hopefully will be a lesson that many institutions take away, because so often international students are, getting that 8 a.m. class because that's all that's left by the time they get to campus to register. So yes. I think that's great, and more power to you for hopefully you can continue that pattern.
Yeah, thank you.
So now it's time to kind of pick up the magic ball, right? Not the magic ball, that's what I keep calling it, but it's a crystal ball. Because I know you have them in your offices, it's paperweights. But to think ahead about the future, and what do you see as emerging trends? What do you think students' needs will be, and the types of services and things that we offer to support them? If there are going to be changes in the future, what do you anticipate those to be? Sevgi.
Oh, okay. So going back on talking about everything that we talked about this past hour or so, touching back, I know it's going to be a little repetitive, but I would say without a doubt using the resources, electronic resources available for advising students, for us to continue, for example, with electronic forms for the benefits that students are going to be applying for, so we held information sessions on OPT and CPT, optional practical training, as well as curricular practical training. And these are held on Zoom. And we see that the participation is very high in these sessions. And they have the ability to ask questions face-to-face and interact in breakout rooms. So we see that works. And I think moving forward, these are things that are going to be continuing, as well as, our ability to respond. So the responsiveness is going to always be there. We have to respond quickly and efficiently and swiftly and get to what the students need and want. Throughout this time, we've sent students several surveys in terms of what is it that they're concerned with most? How is it that we can help them, what they need to succeed? So these are surveys that we sent throughout this time, and we develop programs and approaches based on the responses that we receive from the students. So I think this communication, this interaction with our students is going to help us succeed all together and move forward and get past all of this.
John, Marcia?
Yeah, I can go. Okay. I think one of the things that if everybody thinks back to March of 2020, probably none of us had not thought about the pandemic, right? We have, every international office across the country has always thought that something like this could happen and we need to be prepared for it. But that probably fell on deaf ears, mostly at universities. You weren't going to get much ground talking about pandemics. I think one of the things that happened was that this put us on the map again. And I think that it's super important, if it did, that we take advantage of it, that if you've made relationships, we were invited to meetings that we haven't been invited to before. So I made certain to cultivate those friendships so that we're not quite as off guard the next time something like this happens, because a pandemic is one form of a global emergency, but there are many others, and any of them require us to be able to work with people across campus. So it's not so much that this isn't something that changes how we go forward, but it is certainly something that should make us think about who our relationships are with, and to cultivate some of those conversations at the emergency management level, at the risk management level. And I imagine some of you are doing that, but at least for us, this was a new ground that we had to traverse, and we learned to do it.
Well, and it's a two-way street. There are people who are doing that set of work that never thought about international students or global issues before now. And so
Right.
we are their experts, right? And so, yeah, astute observation. Marcia?
Well, and I think, to repeat what I said before, is we're going to continue to see how we can best serve the students. And some of that is surveying, asking them what they want, what works better for you. We have some new student peer leaders that we're exploring, having students meeting with students to provide services in a better way. But how can we be inclusive to our students no matter where they are? Right? How do we take what we've learned and keep it in practice? Right? So we have a sash ceremony that happens at the end of graduation. We give them those pretty sashes with the flags, and that was always in person. And during the pandemic, it was not. And we had students all over the world because of the sash company. They helped the students get the sashes wherever they were. And so families took part from other countries in our ceremony. So the
awesome.
ceremony, it was so cool. So the ceremony coming up, we're going to bring that together. So we'll still have the stage, and I'll put the sashes on them, and we'll do the sashing, but then we're going to put videos of live feed with using Teams, and we'll bring in some of the parents, some of the people who've left, because sometimes people leave before the ceremonies and their lives are different. So it's that continually evolving, is how do we meet the students where they are, not where we are, right? Because before, service was delivered where we were.
Right.
And now it's, where are you? How do we include you, all of you? And that's important at a school of our size, because our students are across multiple campuses. They might be on, a CPT assignment and in Michigan or California or Texas. They work all over. How do we continue to include them? And I think that's going to be something, if I look into the future, we're going to find better ways to do that, to be completely inclusive of all the students.
Yeah, and I think something you said and Sevgi said, I think our students know more, are better positioned to ask what they need, right? And ask for what's important to them. And the question is, how do we go about delivering, and how do we ask our institutions to support us in a way so that we can support the new international students? So what do you need from your institutions moving forward, and what do they need to know about how we need to feel supported in order to support others? Sevgi, were you going to say something?
Okay.
Something else?
Was that a
Something
full
totally
question?
different?
Because what do we need? Boy, that we could all just jump right in and tell you a list of things that we need.
Budget, funding.
Budget, funding,
Bigger
a seat at the
space.
table.
Where do we begin? Let's see. I mean, I think overall, in hindsight, I think we've been very fortunate in the sense that, I think we learned that the university community, there's been increased visibility of international students with this pandemic. And there's this added layer of awareness of their needs, and that they have this, like I said before, a unique challenge that's different from domestic students. Things that domestic students don't necessarily need to worry about are things that are at the forefront for them to be able to even get here. So I think that the fact that the university community, the senior admissions is aware of this, the fact that there is that added layer of flexibility in allowing us to work with the students who are not able to travel and arrive in time. They had the option of beginning remotely and then coming when they're able to come. Because of the case of, rising case of COVID across the world, the lockdowns that are happening in so many different cities and countries, the border closed, there are so many different parts, like moving parts, if you will. And so I think in that sense, in terms of the university community, what helps us is the fact that they're empathetic to this, that they're sympathetic, that they understand, they allow us the flexibility to work with the students to help them get here. And that understanding, I think, is fundamental to everything else. Everything else comes into power after that. It kind of, the initiatives, the outreach, that's all following that understanding, I think, in that response system and that level of cooperation, if you will.
Let me pause here. I don't think I said at the beginning, but if you all in the audience have questions for us, please put it in the chat or put it in the Q&A, because we will have a little time in the next few minutes to hopefully address them. So feel free to add any comments there. John, did you have something you wanted to add about what TCU can do for international students and you?
I need a lot of things. No, just kidding. One of the things that I think that for us, as we began to tap into providing content and platform in the summer, it just opened up the whole Pandora's box of all the things we could be doing related to that. I think for many international students, the most stress that they go through is between the day they get the I-20 and the day they come to campus, right? And it's really not a time when we're really particularly engaged with the students. Maybe admissions is engaged with them or something like that. But so we're rethinking that. We're thinking hard about what that period of time looks like. And it is that moment when, actually, I think in most campuses, admissions really does the heavy lifting of that engagement. And I think maybe that's to our detriment, not because they're not doing a good job, but because that's also when we can establish our identity as the office that works with them to solve their issues. So I think that's one area. Another thing that I think is that I think we need, but also that I think is now easier and at our fingertips, is this kind of programming. If you think about how we did professional development pre-COVID, we went to a NAFSA conference, we went to an ACE conference, we did AIEA. We went somewhere at a cost of lots of money, and spent 3 or 4 days really engaging, and that's beneficial. I don't want to say we don't need that, but boy, these kind of things for me are really fun. It just dawned on me at some point in 2020. Maybe all of you figured this out, but it just dawned on me that I could just set up my own personal professional development by calling 3 people that work in restorative justice and getting them on there and Zooming with them, and we've started doing some of that. So I think that's been for us also. It's not so much what we need, but it's now the right people at the table to help us reimagine what this is before it becomes an argument about bricks and mortar versus digital, right? We need to get in front of that.
Yeah, a good point to stop and say kudos to Michigan Language Assessment for putting together this 2-day conference. Really appreciate it. Real helpful. So what other things do you want to say before we close out? We don't have any questions at the moment from the audience. So, what supports, what do your team members need?
So I did want to jump in and say, we joked about what we need, and of course we all say we need more staff, more money, those kinds of things. But one of the things we continue to need is to be listened to, right? So our offices need to be heard by administration. I'm fortunate at my institution; they have listened to us and have brought our office to the table. But during the pandemic, it seemed like people were hearing. It's one thing to be at a table and speaking. Oh yeah, you're there, but to be heard, right? To be actively heard, and then things react from there. And I think that's what we all need to continue to advocate for. Is like John said, we have to be ready for whatever the next world crisis is, whatever our students are going to need in the future. And the only way to be ready is for us to be actively heard by our leadership. So that we're able to make those plans and make them in a meaningful way rather than us just in our silos making plans, but through the entire university.
One of the things I learned and we'll have to continue to work on is the importance of some of our relationships with our development folks and our donors. Because, when there was COVID emergency funds from the federal government, our students weren't eligible for them. So what about their emergencies, right? So we thankfully had some very generous donors that helped our emergency funds, but they have been, the funds have been really requested a lot in the past year and a half, and I really feel the need to learn more about the development space to work more effectively with our donors, because we certainly need, they'll certainly have needs moving forward as well. We do have a question from Vicki. Let's see, how do we serve our students how do we serve our international students' needs digitally 24/7 while preserving our sanity and protecting our staffs without the 9-to-5 borders? So, you have access to Zoom and Teams at home. Why can't you work all day and all night?
It's a great question. I will say, just because I answered this question today to a colleague, it at the end of the day, our own self, our self-development is super important, and perhaps the thing we pay the least amount of attention to. And I think particularly for those of us that have been in the field for a while, some of our push professionally should be towards, not spa days, serious professional development about taking care of yourselves and learning to draw lines and set boundaries, learning what kind of toxicity exists in a university environment and how to avoid that. How many of us haven't been drug into things that we have no business being in because of the way a conversation goes at an institution? So I think that those are really important and really good questions. But the first thing is, being very comfortable saying, no, sorry, I'm not going to answer an email. I've got a colleague that Judith knows very well, and I'll get emails from her at 1 a.m. and it just drives me crazy. Just drives me crazy.
I think that's a good point, right? We all need to take our vacation and tune off. I'm taking one next week, and I told my staff I'm gonna not go on my phone. I'm gonna take Teams off my phone so it doesn't ring, right? There's an emergency, contact this person. I think that makes sense. But to answer the question directly, is in our request and appointment, we're starting to put times so the students can name times, so that it's not just any time you want, but you will have a selection of times. And if this time doesn't work, we'll try to work with you, and then work that out with the advisors. But you do need to, and I did this throughout the pandemic, I would go to staff that I would see online all night, and I would say, hey, if you're going to be online at night, then don't be working 8 to 12, right? I mean, you've got to carve out your 8 hours. And we've got to, as supervisors, continue to meet with our staff to make sure we understand what their needs are. And I've been doing quarterly meetings with all my staff and just directly asking that question: what do you need from me? What work hours work for you? How does this work? How do you see yourself? And to actively listen to what they're saying, to make sure that we're not burning them out. And I've said to some people, let's take a day. Let's take a day and refresh yourself, because you can't be here all night.
And Marcia, don't you feel like it's the same for students too? We have to have that conversation with them.
Yes, 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 exactly. You've got to learn to relax, and you've got to take some time and just not, yeah.
Exactly. And to echo what everybody said, in that sense, you can't really help others unless you can help yourself too. And so it's one of those things where you just kind of have to step away and just at least take a breath, and one of those things. And for example, with us, like with what Marcia said, we use what we call bookings. And so it's basically a link under a signature in Outlook. And so we offer in-person advising, phone advising, and Zoom advising. So the in-person is daily as well as the others. And so the students can go directly in bookings, and whenever we have those open slots on our calendar, they don't even need to ask us. They just schedule themselves in. And so our work hours are set. And then, of course, they're going to send emails after hours, and it depends on the person. If you're online and you're willing to answer, then yes. If not, if you want to carve that time out for yourself, of course. So it's one of those things where there's that fine line. But at the end of the day, I know with our team, we're very close knit, and we rely on each other a lot, and we depend on each other, and we support each other a lot. And that's something that is very important to all of us. And so no matter what, if somebody is having a day where they're just, they need additional help, everybody's willing to step in. And so it's a team effort. It's more like you become more like a family, I think, because of the pandemic. And so I think we're all even closer knit than we were before. And in terms of supporting one another and supporting our students as well.
Yeah, we have several staff who are kind of at the max of their vacation. If you don't use it, you lose it. And, I wish I was at that point. I mean, I use my vacation, which is good, I guess, so, but I encourage people to take it. If it's a half hour, if it's a, half day here or a couple days there, take it, don't lose it. We have a great question here in the Q&A. As a professional new to working with international students and learning all the ins and outs, what is your biggest piece of advice? So this is a new professional who's seeking advice from us because we've been around.
Well, I think I'm going to make a plug for NAFSA, because I have all my new stuff. At least get a NAFSA login so that you can gain knowledge from NAFSA. That's been a home. I know that's where I met Judith long ago, and learned to be a professional in international education. And I think that there's a lot of good to be had in that organization, in their listservs and their chat groups and their conferences and their interactions.
Yeah. I think I would say yes. I think professional development is all around us. The International Center at U of M is in the Division of Student Life, and our Student Life Division does a ton of professional development programs, conversations on diversity, equity, and inclusion, professional development, leadership development, all sorts of skill building things, as does a university. And so, speaking to what John's saying, you can do it on the cheap nowadays, right? You don't have to spend money going to a conference or being a member of something. There are a lot of free opportunities out there, and there's probably a lot of free opportunities around you. And I think to what Marcia was saying, when we met years and years ago, was, we really valued being around others and forming and networking and forming friendships, so that we always had someone to call. Have you ever experienced this? I remember, and I will always say this, when I was in a position where I was overseeing recruitment and admissions, the first person I called was Marcia, to say, what do I need to know? I need a quick 101, and it was really helpful, and it really set me up for success. So making sure that you're networking. Other advice for our newbie?
I would just say enjoy every minute, because it's one of those things where, working with international students, especially, every day is going to be different, no matter what, you can't have, it's never set in stone, and there's always going to be a different circumstance, a different situation that the student is in. And you learn so much from those interactions. And I think you just have to have an open mind and listen and be an active listener, not just listen, but just really truly listen to what that person is saying and truly understand what they're saying, because sometimes they can be coming from a different cultural or background, the language barrier. There's so many different things that come into play when working with international students. And I just think just keeping that open mind and enjoying it, just you learn every day. And it's one of those things where, I've had different hats in this field, and each day is different. And I learn something new every day. So that's one thing that I would recommend maybe.
And it takes such humility to say, I need to learn this, right? So going to your colleagues and saying, I don't understand how this works, explain this to me, that kind of thing. I think that's a great humility and sense of wanting to learn, right? So we have another comment here. So how do we shift back is basically what it's asking. We've totally invested ourselves in the remote realm to meet the pandemic's, the challenges generated by the pandemic. So is it going to be difficult for international students to shift back to in-person once things are back to normal? Then again, what is considered normal in education anymore? So it's a great question, Jordan. Thoughts on that? John Singleton, I bet you have a thought on that.
Yeah, I have this story about a train that no, just kidding, Judy. Judy warned me about some of my stories, but yeah. So and it goes back also to the question of how do we set boundaries. Somewhere in New York, my son is up every night at 3 a.m., which is when he probably chooses to text his professors for questions. And what I pray the professors are doing is not responding at all until the next day, and then saying, hey, come in and let's talk about this. I'm not only, I want to help you with the question, but also worried about getting emails at 3 a.m. but what that's speaking about you. I don't think we're going to go back. I don't think we'll ever return to that other day. I think that good or bad, the pandemic brought out some weaknesses in our delivery and some places where we can do better, and highlighted the difference between digital natives and those of us that sit in the middle and people that were born before computers existed that might be teaching some of our classes. And I think that the fact is that we'll never return to that other place, and probably shouldn't anyway. I think now I think that's a great question. I think that question's going to get reframed in the future to being, how now do we blend these things to create the best design? And I think that some of those creativities are going to make some of these universities on here, particularly I'm thinking about universities with huge global footprints, it's going to make you amazing, and it's going to make students flock even more to getting under your umbrella. But yeah, we'll see.
I think some role modeling is going to be needed. We just had this morning our vice president's meeting, and we were in person for part of it, and he was insistent. We're saying the students need to be back in the classroom. That means we need to be back together in large spaces, socially distanced, wearing our masks, but definitely appreciate him role modeling that for us. I'm still going to have my staff meeting by Zoom, but appreciate him role modeling it and me having to show up today. So, so anyhow, I think we're at time. So Fernando, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're at time. And I've thoroughly enjoyed visiting with Sevgi, with John, and with Marcia, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation as well. And I appreciate again, Fernando, the invitation for us to talk about how we've been supporting students, how we need to continue supporting students, and what all this means for international offices.